The war room smelled like fear and desperation. Ambassador Thrin's scales had lost their usual bright blue color, now faded to a dull gray that matched the mood of every military commander seated around the holographic display. The numbers floating above the table told a story nobody wanted to hear. 17 systems had fallen to the Ravager swarm in just 3 months. Billions of lives were gone, consumed by an enemy that showed no interest in negotiation or mercy. General Corvus slammed his fist against the metal table, making the younger officers jump. His species rarely showed emotion, but today his anger was clear. We lost 40% of our forces at Helios Gate, 40% in 6 hours. At this rate, we will have nothing left to defend our core worlds. Thrin looked at the hologram showing their last battle. Ships exploded in silent bursts of light, while the insect-like Ravager vessels swarmed through the debris, hunting survivors. The Calibris Union had ruled this sector of space for 2,000 years. They had never faced an enemy like this. Their weapons barely scratched the Ravager hull plating. Their shields could not stop the acid projectiles that melted through armor like water through paper. "We need allies," Thrin said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Commander Willis leaned forward. She had escaped from Helios Gate with only 3 ships from her original fleet of 20. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had watched friends die while being unable to help them. "You mean the humans?" Several commanders made sounds of disgust. Thrin expected this reaction. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. They were newcomers to the galactic community, barely worth noticing. Their planet was small, and their technology seemed primitive compared to the great civilizations that had existed for millennia. "They are children playing with toys," General Corvus said. "What could they possibly offer us?" Thrin activated a different display. Trade records appeared, showing human merchant vessels moving between systems. "The humans have been our trading partners for 15 years. Their medical supplies are better than anything we can produce. Their food preservation technology keeps supplies fresh 3 times longer than our methods. Their communication systems rarely fail, even in high radiation zones. Selling medicine and food is not the same as fighting a war," another commander argued. "True," Thrin agreed. "But consider this. The humans offered military assistance twice since this war began. Both times we rejected them. We thought they were trying to gain political advantage or seeking payment they did not deserve." Willis sat up straighter. "They offered help when?" "After the Third Battle of Carina, and again after the fall of the Helox colonies. Both times, their diplomatic messages said they had analyzed our combat reports and identified tactical solutions. We ignored them." The room erupted in arguments. Some commanders thought asking humans for help would make the Union look weak. Others pointed out that looking weak was better than being extinct. Thrin let them argue for several minutes before raising his hand for silence. "We are losing this war. Our weapons are ineffective. Our tactics have failed repeatedly. We need new ideas, and the humans are the only ones offering them." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I propose we send a diplomatic vessel to Earth and formally request their military support." General Corvus stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. "And if they refuse, or worse, if they agree and their primitive weapons prove useless, we will have wasted time we do not have." "Then we die knowing we tried everything," Thrin said simply. The vote was close, but desperation won over pride. Within the hour, a message was transmitted to human space. Thrin wrote it himself, keeping the language formal but honest. He explained the situation, admitted their previous mistakes in rejecting human offers, and asked for whatever help humanity could provide. 3 days passed with no response. The Ravager swarm attacked 2 more colony worlds. Millions more died. Thrin began to think the humans would ignore them, punishment for years of dismissive treatment. On the 4th day, the response came. It was short, direct, and written in the simple style humans seem to prefer for important communications. We have been monitoring the situation. Our fleet will deploy to your position. Expect arrival in 6 days. Admiral Patricia Okoye, Human Defense Command. Thryn read the message 3 times. The humans had been monitoring the war. For how long? And they were sending a fleet immediately, without negotiating terms or asking for payment. He tried to access human military databases to learn about this Admiral Okoye, but the files were restricted. The only information available was that she commanded humanity's deep space operations. Commander Willis appeared in his office that evening. She looked even more tired than before. Do you really think they can help? The humans have never fought a war in space. They have no experience with enemies like the Ravagers. Thryn pulled up the old messages humans had sent, the offers of help they had rejected. He pointed to one particular line that appeared in both transmissions. Look at this phrase. They said they had analyzed our combat reports and identified tactical solutions, not that they wanted to learn about the enemy. They said they had already analyzed everything. So that means they have been studying this war the entire time, watching every battle, learning from our mistakes. Maybe they have never fought in space before, but they have been preparing. Willis did not look convinced, but she nodded. I hope you are right, because if the humans fail, we have nothing left. No other allies, no backup plan, no hope. 6 days later, Thryn boarded a transport heading to Luna Station near Earth. He needed to meet this human fleet himself, to understand what kind of help they were really offering. As his ship approached the human solar system, his scanner officer made a sound of surprise. Ambassador, you need to see this. The display showed Luna Station and the space around Earth's moon. Thryn felt his heart skip a beat. The humans had not sent a small support fleet. Hundreds of vessels filled the orbital space, arranged in perfect geometric formations. Each ship bore the same emblem, a blue planet surrounded by stars. They had not been preparing for 6 days. They had been ready for much longer. The question was, ready for what? Thryn had visited many military installations across the galaxy. He had seen the massive orbital fortresses of the Kelthari Empire, the living ship gardens of the Praxis Collective, and the quantum shipyards that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Nothing prepared him for what he saw at Luna Station. Every human vessel held perfect position relative to the others. No drift, no adjustment burns, just absolute precision. The formations looked like geometry lessons, with ships arranged in spheres, triangles, and interlocking patterns that seemed to serve both defensive and offensive purposes. His tactical computer tried to analyze the positioning and gave up after detecting over 300 possible firing solutions from any single point in space. A human shuttle arrived to transport the diplomatic team to the command ship. The pilot was young, maybe 25 years old by human standards, but she flew with the kind of casual skill that came from thousands of hours of practice. She docked with their transport so smoothly that Thryn barely felt the connection engage. "Welcome to Luna Station, Ambassador," she said with a slight smile. "Admiral Okoye is waiting for you aboard the Endeavour. That's our flagship." The Endeavour was not the largest ship in the fleet, but it sat at the center of the formation where it could coordinate with all other vessels. As Thryn's team transferred aboard, he noticed the crew moved with quiet efficiency. Nobody rushed, but nobody wasted motion either. Every person seemed to know exactly what they needed to do and did it without being told. Admiral Patricia Okoye met them in a conference room that looked nothing like the grand halls other species used for diplomatic meetings. The room was small, practical, with basic furniture and displays showing tactical information. Okoye herself was a tall woman with dark skin and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple uniform with minimal decorations, though Thryn noticed the insignia on her shoulder indicated she commanded the entire human deep space fleet. "Ambassador Thryn, Commander Willis, thank you for coming. Her voice was calm and professional. "I understand you need help with the Ravager problem." Problem? She called an existential threat to galactic civilization a problem, like it was an equation to solve rather than an unstoppable force of nature. Thrin tried to match her calm tone. "Yes, Admiral. The Ravager swarm has proven resistant to all our conventional tactics. We were hoping your forces might provide support in defensive operations." Akoi smiled slightly. "Ambassador, we are not here to provide support. We are here to end this war." She activated the displays around the room. Images appeared showing every major battle the Ravagers had fought. Each battle was broken down into hundreds of data points, tracking ship movements, weapon effectiveness, formation changes, and tactical decisions. The level of detail was stunning. "We have been studying this conflict for 3 months," Akoi explained. "Every engagement, every skirmish, every encounter. We have analyzed 17,000 individual combat events. The Ravagers are effective, but they are not unpredictable." General Corvus, who had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission, leaned forward. "You claim to understand an enemy you have never fought." "General, my species has been fighting wars for 5,000 years. We have detailed records of every major conflict in human history. We know how to recognize patterns, identify weaknesses, and exploit tactical errors." She pulled up new data. "The Ravagers have 17 consistent weaknesses in their combat doctrine. They rely on overwhelming numbers and aggression. They expect enemies to panic when swarmed. They have never adapted to an opponent who remains calm under pressure." Thrin watched the analysis scroll past. The humans had identified things his own military analysts had missed: timing patterns in Ravager attacks, predictable responses to certain ship formations, gaps in their point defense coverage during high-speed approaches. "How did you gather this much intelligence?" he asked. "We have been watching. Our stealth vessels have been observing Ravager movements since the war began. They did not detect us because they were not looking for us. Nobody in the galaxy takes human military capabilities seriously." She said this without any anger or resentment, just a statement of fact. Willis spoke up, her voice skeptical. "Admiral, with respect, your weapons technology is generations behind ours. You use kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. The Ravagers have adaptive shielding that makes those weapons useless." Akoi pulled up new images showing human weapon systems. "Commander, you are correct that we use kinetic weapons, but we use them in ways you have not considered. Our railguns accelerate projectiles to 0.03% of light speed. At those velocities, shields designed to deflect energy weapons become irrelevant. The projectiles simply punch through before the shield can register the threat." She showed a simulation. A human railgun fired a tungsten rod at a Ravager vessel. The shield flickered but could not form a solid barrier fast enough. The rod penetrated the hull and continued through to the other side, the kinetic energy causing massive internal damage. "We also use missiles in ways that differ from galactic standard. Our missiles do not just chase targets. They coordinate with each other, communicate constantly, and adapt their approach based on enemy responses. A Ravager ship might shoot down 5 missiles, but the remaining 25 will adjust their attack pattern in real time." General Corvus stared at the simulation. "This is theoretical. You have never tested these weapons against actual Ravager vessels." "You are wrong, General. 3 weeks ago, a Ravager scout group of 6 ships entered human observation space near the Tyros system. They did not leave. We have their wreckage in our research facilities right now." Akoi pulled up images of destroyed Ravager vessels being studied by human scientists. "We know exactly how much damage our weapons can do." The room went silent. The humans had been testing their weapons on real enemies without anyone knowing. They had been preparing for war while the rest of the galaxy thought they were irrelevant. Thrin found his voice. "Admiral, how many ships are you committing to this operation?" 230 vessels are ready for immediate deployment. Another 400 are in various stages of preparation at our shipyards. We can maintain continuous operations for 18 months without resupply. And you believe you can defeat the Ravagers with this force? Akoi looked at him directly. Ambassador, I do not believe. I know. We will deploy to the Tyros system where our intelligence indicates the next major Ravager attack will occur. We will arrive before they do, prepare our positions, and when they enter the system, we will destroy them. Completely. Her confidence was not arrogance. It was the certainty of someone who had done the calculations, run the simulations, and knew the outcome before the battle began. Thryn realized the humans did not see war as chaos. They saw it as a science, something that could be studied, understood, and controlled. When do you deploy? He asked. We leave in 4 hours. I suggest you and Commander Willis join us. You should see what human warfare looks like. The jump to Tyro's system took 18 hours. Thryn spent most of that time watching the human crew work. Nobody shouted orders or rushed around in panic like he had seen on Allied vessels during combat alerts. Instead, each crew member performed their duties with mechanical precision. The weapons officer ran checks on the railgun systems every 2 hours. The communications team maintained constant silent updates with the rest of the fleet. Even the young ensign who brought him water moved through the corridors like she had walked the same path 1,000 times before. Commander Willis sat next to him in the observation room, watching the same thing. They are too calm. Either they do not understand the danger, or they know something we do not. I think it is the second option, Thryn replied. When the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Tyro's system, alarms immediately blared on the Endeavour. The tactical display lit up with red markers. The Ravager swarm had arrived first. 400 vessels were already engaged with the Calibris defense fleet protecting the colony world. Thryn watched in horror as familiar ship types exploded under Ravager assault. The defenders were retreating, trying to form a defensive line closer to the planet. It was not working. Ravager vessels swarmed through gaps in the formation, targeting engine clusters and life support systems with deadly accuracy. We are too late, General Corvus said, his voice hollow. The defense fleet will be destroyed in minutes. Admiral Akoi stood at the command center, her eyes on the tactical display. She did not look worried. Helm, position the fleet in formation Delta 7. Weapons, begin target acquisition on Ravager vessels. Prioritize the ones marked with red indicators. Admiral, we are still 3 million kilometers from effective weapon range, the weapons officer reported. I am aware. Begin targeting anyway. The human fleet moved into position with the same geometric precision they had shown at Luna Station. Ships arranged themselves in a sphere formation with the Endeavour at the center. Smaller vessels formed a protective screen around the larger battleships. Nobody fired weapons yet. They just watched. 7 minutes passed. Thryn counted every second. The Calibris fleet lost another 30 ships. The colony world below was broadcasting desperate evacuation orders. Civilian transports were launching from the surface, trying to escape before the Ravagers broke through. Then Admiral Akoi spoke again, her voice still perfectly calm. All vessels, you are cleared to engage. Fire when ready. The human fleet opened fire from a distance that made no tactical sense. Galactic warfare happened at ranges where ships could see each other on visual displays. Energy weapons needed proximity to be effective because they dispersed over distance. Firing from 3 million kilometers was a waste of ammunition. Except human weapons did not disperse. Railgun rounds were solid metal traveling at impossible speeds. They did not lose energy over distance. They just kept going until they hit something or disappeared into space. 40 Ravager ships exploded simultaneously. The alien vessels had no warning, no time to raise shields or take evasive action. One moment they were pursuing fleeing defenders, the next moment tungsten rounds were punching through their hulls at velocities that turned metal into plasma. The rounds did not just penetrate one ship. They went through the first target and continued into the ships behind them. Thryn stared at the display in disbelief. The Ravagers were reacting now, turning their attention toward the human fleet. They abandoned their pursuit of the Calibris vessels and redirected 150 ships toward this new threat. This was their standard response to enemy reinforcements. Swarm the new arrivals, overwhelm them with numbers, then return to the original target. The Ravager formation accelerated to attack speed. They would reach the human fleet in 4 minutes at their current velocity. Thryn had seen this tactic work dozens of times. Nobody could withstand the concentrated firepower of that many vessels attacking at once. "Missile batteries, launch pattern Alpha 3, Admiral Akoi ordered. Every human ship released missiles at the same moment. Thousands of projectiles left their launch tubes, filling the space between the two fleets with a cloud of guided weapons. Thryn had seen missile attacks before. They were useful for harassment but easy to shoot down with point defense systems. The Ravagers had excellent point defense. But these missiles did not behave like normal projectiles. They spread out in three-dimensional patterns, creating geometric formations of their own. They communicated with each other using tight beam transmissions that were almost impossible to intercept. As the Ravagers opened fire with their point defense weapons, the missiles reacted. Groups of missiles would cluster together, making the defense systems focus fire on one location. Then, at the last second, they would scatter and the real attack would come from a different angle. When the Ravagers adjusted their defense patterns, the missiles adapted again. It was like watching an intelligent swarm fighting against a predictable machine. The Ravager point defense systems were designed to intercept energy weapon lock-ons and slow-moving torpedoes. They were not designed to track thousands of small targets that changed tactics in real time. 80 Ravager vessels disappeared in the missile barrage. Some were hit by single missiles that found gaps in their armor. Others were struck by multiple projectiles that overwhelmed their shields with simultaneous impacts. Willis gripped the arms of her chair. By the stars, they lost 120 ships in 4 minutes. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The human tactical officer corrected without looking up from his console. The remaining Ravager vessels continued their attack approach. They were close now, entering what Galactic Doctrine considered optimal combat range. This was where they expected to dominate with their superior numbers and heavy weapons. Admiral Akoi checked her display. Navigation, activate evasion pattern Theta. All vessels engage close combat protocols. The human ships suddenly accelerated at rates that should have crushed their crews from the G-forces. Thryn felt his stomach lurch even though the inertial dampeners on the Endeavor kept him safely in his seat. The human vessels were pulling maneuvers that would kill anyone on board a normal ship. Their dampening technology was far more advanced than anything the Calibris Union possessed. The perfect sphere formation dissolved into what looked like chaos. Human ships scattered in all directions, moving independently but somehow maintaining awareness of every other vessel's position. The Ravagers tried to swarm individual targets but found themselves unable to predict the erratic movement patterns. Then the close-range weapons opened fire. Human ships had point defense turrets covering every angle of approach. Unlike the manually aimed weapon systems most species used, these turrets were controlled by computers that could track and engage hundreds of targets simultaneously. Ravager boarding craft, small fighter vessels, and even larger ships found themselves being shredded by streams of high-velocity rounds. The Ravagers attempted their boarding tactics, trying to crash their ships into human vessels and send their insect warriors across. A Ravager cruiser lined up an approach vector on a human destroyer. It accelerated to ramming speed, its armored prow designed to punch through enemy hulls. The human destroyer simply moved out of the way, not slowly or clumsily. It shifted position with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, letting the Ravager vessel pass through empty space. Then it fired its main railgun directly into the Ravager's engine section at point-blank range. The alien ship broke apart. 11 minutes after the first human shot, the last Ravager vessel in the system exploded. Not a single enemy had escaped. Not one had successfully damaged a human ship. The Calibris Defense Fleet survivors floated in space, their communication channels silent with shock. The silence in the observation room felt heavier than the darkness of space outside. Thrin stared at the tactical display showing the positions of destroyed Ravager vessels. Debris fields marked where ships had been torn apart by weapons that should not have been effective. His entire understanding of modern warfare had just been proven wrong. General Corvus spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to see the casualty reports from your fleet." The human tactical officer responded without emotion. "0 casualties, General. 3 vessels sustained minor hull damage from debris impacts. Repairs are already underway." "That is impossible. The combat logs are available for your review." The officer transferred the data to Corvus's personal display. Commander Willis was reading through the same information on her own screen. Her hands shook slightly as she scrolled through the numbers. "Admiral Akoy, your fleet destroyed 400 Ravager vessels in 11 minutes. The Calibris Union has been fighting this war for 3 months, and we have destroyed fewer than 200 enemy ships total. How is this possible?" Admiral Akoy walked over to the display showing the battle aftermath. She zoomed in on several Ravager wrecks, highlighting specific damage patterns. "Commander, the Ravagers are effective against opponents who fight the way they expect. Your fleets use energy shields, plasma weapons, and close-range combat tactics. The Ravagers evolved their defenses to counter exactly those methods." She pulled up a comparison chart showing Calibris weapons versus human weapons. Energy weapons can be dispersed by adaptive shielding. Plasma bolts travel slowly enough to be tracked and evaded. Your combat doctrine focuses on ship-to-ship duels at close range where the Ravagers have numerical advantage. And human weapons are different. Completely different. Kinetic weapons cannot be dispersed. They travel too fast to evade once fired. Our missiles think independently and adapt to enemy responses. We engage from distances where the enemy cannot effectively return fire. When they close the gap, our ships are faster and more maneuverable than anything they have encountered before. Thrin processed this information. "You said you have been preparing for this war. For how long?" Akoy considered the question before answering. "Humanity achieved faster than light travel 30 years ago. We immediately began studying every spacefaring civilization we could find. We analyzed your cultures, your technologies, and your military capabilities. Not because we wanted to conquer you, but because we needed to understand what kind of universe we had entered." She pulled up historical data showing human military development. "My species has a complicated history with warfare. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We developed weapons capable of destroying our own planet. We nearly wiped ourselves out several times before we finally learned to cooperate." The display showed images Thrin recognized from human history files. Ancient warriors with metal swords, massive armies clashing across open fields, strange aircraft dropping explosives on cities, vessels that traveled underwater launching missiles. The progression of human violence was documented in careful detail. "When we discovered we were not alone in the universe, we had to make a choice," Akoy continued. "We could use our knowledge of warfare to dominate others, or we could use it to protect them. We chose protection." General Corvus studied the human military history with obvious fascination. "Your people never stopped fighting. Even when you achieved peace on your homeworld, you continued to study warfare. Because peace is not a natural state, General. Peace is something you build and defend. We study warfare so we can end wars quickly and with minimal casualties. Every human ship captain has studied thousands of historical battles. We learn from the mistakes of civilizations that existed before we even discovered fire. We know what works and what does not work. A communication alert interrupted the conversation. The Calibris Defense Fleet commander was requesting permission to come aboard the Endeavour. Admiral Akoy approved the request, and within 30 minutes, Commander Garrett arrived in the conference room. His uniform was scorched and he had a bandage on his left arm, but he was alive. "Admiral, I needed to thank you in person. My fleet would have been destroyed if you had not arrived." He looked around the room, noticing the displays showing battle analysis. "I watched your attack through our sensors. I have never seen anything like it. The precision, the coordination, the absolute efficiency of every action." "Your fleet fought well, Commander," Akoy said. "You held the line long enough for us to engage the enemy. That was not a small accomplishment." Garrett shook his head. "We were losing, badly. The Ravagers were cutting through our formations like we were not even there. Then your ships opened fire from a distance we thought was impossible, and everything changed. They did not know how to fight you." "That was the objective. We studied their tactics and developed countermeasures they could not predict or adapt to." Akoy pulled up a new display showing the entire Tyros system. "The battle here was important, but it was only the beginning. The Ravagers have occupied 17 systems. We need to liberate all of them." Thryn felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. "Can you do that? Can your fleet really drive the Ravagers back?" "Not just drive them back, Ambassador. We are going to end their threat permanently." She activated a strategic map showing Ravager-controlled space. "Our intelligence networks have identified their main hive clusters. We know where their queens are located, which systems serve as their supply depots, and which routes they use for reinforcements." Willis leaned forward. "You have intelligence networks operating in Ravager territory. How?" "Stealth technology and patience. We have had observers in those systems for 2 months. The Ravagers never detected them because they were not looking for threats as small as our reconnaissance vessels." Akoy highlighted several systems on the map. "We will strike these locations simultaneously, destroy their supply infrastructure, eliminate their command structures, and force them to retreat to their home cluster." General Corvus looked skeptical again. "Admiral, even if you can defeat their fleets, they have fortified worlds with billions of soldiers. Ground invasions would take years." "We are not planning invasions, General. We are planning surgical strikes. Human special forces will deploy to disable critical facilities while our fleet maintains orbital superiority. We have soldiers trained specifically for operations in hostile alien environments." Garrett spoke up. "Admiral, with respect, the Ravagers are deadly in close combat. They evolved on a high-gravity world with toxic atmosphere. They are stronger than most species, and they do not fear death. Ground operations against them have always been suicide missions." Akoy smiled slightly. "Commander, you have never seen human soldiers in action. We evolved on a world similar to the Ravager homeworld. High gravity, dangerous predators, harsh environments. Humans are persistence hunters. We do not give up, we do not break easily, and we have been fighting in hostile conditions since before we discovered agriculture." She pulled up training footage showing human soldiers in combat exercises. They wore armored suits that enhanced their already considerable strength. They moved with coordinated precision through simulated enemy territory, using tactics that seemed strange to the galactic observers. Instead of charging directly at enemies, they used cover and flanking maneuvers. Instead of relying on heavy weapons, they combined different tools for maximum effect. "Human infantry doctrine is based on 5,000 years of ground warfare experience," Akoy explained. "We know how to clear buildings, how to fight in zero gravity, how to survive in toxic environments, and how to defeat enemies that outnumber us. The Ravagers are dangerous, but they are not invincible." Thryn watched the training footage with growing amazement. These humans fought like they built their ships, with calculation and precision. Every movement had purpose. Every action was practiced until it became instinct. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "Coordinate with your remaining fleets. We will provide tactical support and training in our methods. Some of your commanders may resist learning from humans, but the ones who are willing to adapt will become much more effective." Willis stood up. "Admiral, I volunteer to embed with your fleet. I want to learn everything I can about your tactics." "Approved, Commander. We can always use officers who are willing to adapt." 3 months after the Battle of Tyro's system, the war had changed completely. Thryn attended a strategy meeting aboard the Endeavour, but this time the room was filled with commanders from 6 different species. All of them wore updated uniforms that included small patches showing they had trained under human military advisors. The patches had become badges of honor, proof that an officer was willing to learn new methods instead of clinging to failed traditions. Commander Willis presented the latest tactical report. She looked different now, more confident and precise in her movements. 3 months of working alongside human forces had changed her approach to everything. "Our combined fleet has liberated 8 systems. Ravager forces are retreating to their core territories. Casualties among Allied forces have dropped by 70% since we adopted human tactical coordination." General Corvus added his own observations. "The Ravagers are adapting to our new strategies, but slowly. They keep expecting us to revert to old patterns and are surprised when we maintain discipline. Human training protocols have proven extremely effective. My own fleet has destroyed twice as many enemy vessels in the last month as we did in the previous 3 months combined." Admiral Akoy studied the strategic map floating above the conference table. "The Ravagers are consolidating at their home cluster. Intelligence reports indicate they are gathering every available vessel for a final defensive stand. We are looking at approximately 2,000 ships plus orbital defense platforms and ground installations." The room went quiet. 2,000 vessels was more than the entire combined fleet possessed. Even with human tactics and weapons, those numbers were overwhelming. Thryn voiced what everyone was thinking. "Admiral, can we win against those odds?" "Numbers alone do not determine victory, Ambassador. The Ravagers are expecting a conventional assault. Large fleets approaching from predictable vectors, attempting to establish orbital superiority through attrition. That is how galactic warfare has always been conducted." "And we will not fight that way." "Correct. We will use a multi-phase assault that exploits their defensive assumptions." Akoy pulled up detailed plans showing the Ravager home cluster: 3 planets, 2 asteroid mining facilities, and a massive space station that served as their command center. Phase 1 begins with long-range bombardment targeting their sensor networks. We blind them first. She showed trajectory calculations for railgun artillery strikes. Human ships would position themselves outside the defense perimeter and fire coordinated salvos at communication satellites and early warning systems. Once their sensors are degraded, we deploy stealth infiltration teams. A new image appeared showing small human vessels, barely larger than fighters, equipped with advanced stealth technology. These ships will carry special forces teams to the orbital defense platforms. The teams will disable the platforms from inside, creating gaps in the defensive coverage. Commander Willis nodded in understanding. "Then the main fleet pushes through the gaps you have created." "Exactly. We have mapped 17 potential breach points based on the platform spacing. We only need to open 3 of them to allow fleet access to the inner system. Once we achieve orbital superiority, ground forces will deploy to the command center and capture or destroy their queen." General Corvus studied the plan carefully. "This requires perfect timing and coordination across hundreds of vessels and dozens of ground teams. If even one element fails, the entire operation could collapse." which is why we have spent 3 months training every crew and every soldier in these exact procedures. We have run this simulation 400 times. Every officer knows their role. Every ship knows its position. Every soldier knows their mission. A young human officer raised his hand. Admiral, what about the Queen herself? Intelligence indicates she is protected by thousands of elite warriors in a fortified hive complex. The Queen is the objective. Lieutenant, human special forces will deploy directly to her location. 50 soldiers equipped with advanced armor and weapons against whatever forces defend her. Akoi pulled up footage showing human soldiers training in mock hive environments. These are not ordinary troops. They are specialists who have trained for exactly this mission. Thrin watched the training footage with concern. The soldiers looked impressive, but 50 against thousands seemed impossible. Admiral, I must ask, what makes you so certain 50 soldiers can accomplish what armies could not? Akoi turned to face him directly. Ambassador, let me explain something about human military history. Throughout our past, we have stories of small groups accomplishing impossible missions. Special operations forces who strike targets that conventional armies cannot reach. Commandos who infiltrate enemy strongholds. Rangers who hold positions against overwhelming odds. She pulled up historical records showing human conflicts. 300 Spartans holding a pass against an army of thousands. A dozen soldiers defending a medical station against hundreds of attackers. Teams of 6 infiltrating enemy command centers and changing the course of entire wars. We do not always win through superior numbers. We win through superior training, planning, and execution. The display showed current footage of the team that would assault the Queen's hive. They moved through training courses with mechanical precision, each soldier covering specific angles and responding to threats before they fully materialized. Their armor incorporated advanced sensors that allowed them to see through walls and coordinate without verbal communication. Their weapons ranged from standard rifles to specialized tools designed for breaching hardened positions. These soldiers have trained together for 6 months, Akoi continued. They know each other's movements instinctively. They have studied every piece of intelligence we have on the hive layout. They have practiced assault scenarios against opponents wearing power armor that simulates Ravager warrior capabilities. They are ready. Commander Garrett, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. When do we begin the operation? In 3 days. The fleet will position for the initial bombardment in 48 hours. Ground teams will deploy 12 hours after the bombardment begins. The entire operation should be complete within 18 hours from first shot to final objective. Willis looked at the timeline displayed on the screen. 18 hours to end a war that has killed billions and lasted 3 months. War is not about how long it takes, Commander. It is about achieving objectives efficiently. The Ravagers became a threat because nobody knew how to fight them effectively. We studied them, identified their weaknesses, and developed countermeasures. Now we execute the plan. Thrin felt the weight of what was about to happen. 3 days from now, the war would either be over or humanity's credibility would be destroyed. Admiral, what happens if the plan fails? If the infiltration teams are detected or the Queen escapes? Then we adapt. Humans are good at adapting, Ambassador. It is one of our most valuable traits. We make plans, but we also prepare for those plans to change. Every soldier, every ship captain, every tactical officer knows the primary objectives and has authorization to achieve them through alternative methods if necessary. She pulled up one final display showing the combined fleet ready for deployment. 600 vessels from multiple species, all coordinated through human tactical networks. We have built an alliance based on shared purpose and mutual respect. Your people were brave enough to ask for help. My people are honored to provide it. Together, we will end this threat. The meeting concluded with final preparation orders. Crews returned to their ships. Ground teams began loading equipment. Intelligence officers transmitted final updates on enemy positions. The entire combined fleet moved like a single organism, each part working toward the same goal. Thryn stood on the observation deck of the Endeavour, watching ships maneuver into departure formation. Willis joined him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think they can really do it?" she asked. "End the war in 18 hours?" Thryn remembered the first battle he had witnessed. 11 minutes to destroy 400 enemy ships. "Yes, I believe they can. The question is what happens after. When the war is over, the galaxy will have to accept that humanity is no longer a minor species. They are the most effective military force we have ever seen." "Does that worry you?" "A little. Power without restraint is dangerous. But I have watched Admiral Akoy and her officers carefully. They do not seek glory or conquest. They seek solutions. That gives me hope." The combined fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Ravager home cluster, exactly on schedule. Thryn watched from the observation deck as 600 vessels spread into attack formation. Human ships took point positions, while Allied vessels formed supporting layers behind them. Every commander knew their assignment. Every crew had practiced their maneuvers until they could execute them in their sleep. Admiral Akoy stood at the tactical center, her voice calm over the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels begin Phase 1 bombardment. Target packages have been distributed. Fire when ready." The human railgun artillery opened fire first. Tungsten rods launched from specially designed platforms accelerated to incredible velocities. They would travel for 30 minutes before reaching their targets, but the calculations had been made weeks ago. Human computers had tracked every satellite, every sensor relay, every communication node in the Ravager defensive network. The rods would arrive at precise moments to create cascading failures across the entire system. Thryn watched the timeline display count down. 29 minutes, 28. The Ravagers had no idea what was coming. Their sensors would detect the fleet, but they would assume it was a standard approach. They would prepare for conventional battle at close range. They would not realize they were already under attack. At the 20-minute mark, the first kinetic rounds began hitting their targets. Communication satellites exploded silently in the darkness. Sensor arrays disintegrated as metal rods punched through their delicate electronics. Early warning stations went dark as their power systems were severed. Within 5 minutes, the Ravager defensive network was blind and deaf. "Phase 2 is go," Akoy announced. "Infiltration teams, you are cleared for deployment." Small stealth vessels detached from the main fleet and accelerated toward the orbital defense platforms. Each platform was a massive structure designed to destroy entire fleets. They had enough firepower to hold off conventional attacks for weeks, but they had never been designed to defend against threats from inside. Captain Rebecca Torres led the infiltration team assigned to Platform 7. Her team of 12 soldiers wore specialized armor that masked their heat signatures and absorbed radar waves. They approached the platform from its blind spot, an area that the designers assumed would always be covered by sensor satellites. Those satellites were now debris. The platform's exterior hull was designed to resist energy weapons and missile impacts. It was not designed to prevent physical boarding. Torres used a plasma cutter to create an access point in a maintenance section. Her team entered the platform and sealed the breach behind them. Inside, the corridors were dark and cramped. The Ravagers built their structures to accommodate their insect-like bodies, not humanoid visitors. Torres and her team moved in single file, their helmet displays showing the route to the platform's control center. They encountered 3 Ravager technicians along the way. The aliens died before they could raise an alarm. Human weapons in close quarters were devastatingly effective. Torres carried a rifle that fired armor-piercing rounds through suppressors, making almost no sound. Her teammates had similar weapons plus breaching charges for locked doors and flash grenades for clearing rooms. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had practiced this exact assault dozens of times. The control center was protected by 12 Ravager warriors in full combat armor. Tors did not try to fight them directly. Her team planted charges on the primary power conduits leading to the platform's main weapons. When the charges detonated, the entire platform went dark. Emergency lights flickered on, but the defensive weapons were offline. All across the Ravager defensive perimeter, similar operations were succeeding. 17 platforms targeted, 14 disabled within 30 minutes. The gaps in the defensive coverage were exactly where Admiral Okoye had predicted they would be. "Phase 3 is go," she ordered. "All vessels, advance through breach points Delta, Foxtrot, and Hotel. Maintain formation integrity and engage enemy vessels as they approach." The combined fleet surged forward. Ravager vessels scrambled to respond, but their coordination was broken without their sensor networks. They could not form cohesive defensive lines. Human ships exploited every gap, every moment of confusion. Allied vessels followed, using the new tactics they had learned over 3 months of training. Commander Willis commanded an Allied cruiser equipped with human weapon modifications. Her crew had learned to think like human tacticians. When a group of Ravager fighters tried to swarm her vessel, she did not panic or attempt to engage them all at once. She maneuvered to create firing solutions that allowed her point defense systems to engage the fighters in sequence. 20 enemy craft approached. 20 enemy craft were destroyed before they could return fire. General Corvus led a squadron through the inner system toward the command space station. Ravager defenses were concentrated there, trying to protect their most important facility. But the human battle plan had anticipated this. While the main fleet engaged the defenders, a secondary force of fast attack ships circled around the outer planets and approached the station from behind. The station's weapons were designed to fire forward, toward approaching threats. They had minimal rear coverage because no enemy had ever managed to get behind them before. Human vessels exploited this weakness with precision strikes that disabled the station's engines and communication arrays. Meanwhile, Captain Tors and the other infiltration teams had new orders. They planted demolition charges on the disabled defense platforms and evacuated to recovery vessels. When the charges detonated, the platforms broke apart in spectacular explosions that created debris fields blocking Ravager reinforcement routes. 6 hours into the operation, human special forces deployed to the planet's surface, where the Queen's Hive complex was located. 50 soldiers in advanced combat armor descended through the atmosphere in stealth pods. They landed 3 kilometers from the Hive entrance and moved through dense jungle terrain toward their objective. Lieutenant David Park led the assault team. His soldiers had trained in simulated Hive environments, but the real complex was more impressive than any simulation. The entrance was a massive opening in the side of a mountain, protected by hundreds of warriors. Direct assault was impossible. So they did not assault directly. Park's team split into 5 groups. 3 groups created diversions at different locations around the Hive perimeter, drawing warriors away from the main entrance. The 4th group used explosives to create a new entrance through a ventilation shaft. The 5th group, led by Park himself, entered through this new breach. Inside the Hive, the corridors were filled with warriors responding to the diversions. Park's team moved through maintenance tunnels and service passages, avoiding direct confrontation whenever possible. Their armor sensors detected the Queen's location deep in the complex. They had 12 minutes to reach her before the diversions would be overwhelmed. They moved faster, through corridors dripping with organic matter, past chambers filled with Ravager eggs, around corners where warriors stood guard. Park used every trick he had learned in 20 years of special operations experience. His team reached the Queen's chamber with 2 minutes to spare. The Queen was massive, 3 times larger than normal Ravagers. She was surrounded by 50 elite guards wearing advanced bioarmor. Park did not give them time to react. His team threw flash grenades and breaching charges simultaneously. The chamber filled with light and noise. Guards stumbled, disoriented. Human soldiers moved with lethal efficiency. 50 guards fell in less than a minute. The Queen tried to escape through a hidden passage, but Park had studied the hive layout. He knew where the passage led. 2 of his soldiers were already there, cutting off her retreat. Target secured, Park reported over the tactical network, requesting immediate extraction. Admiral Akoy received the message aboard the Endeavour. All forces, primary objective achieved. Begin Phase 4, secure the system and establish occupation protocols. The remaining Ravager forces stopped fighting. Without their queen directing them, the hive mind collapsed. Ships drifted without purpose. Warriors dropped their weapons. The war was over. Thryn watched the tactical display showing green status indicators spreading across the system. 18 hours after the operation began, the Ravager threat was ended. Total casualties for the combined fleet, 3%. Human casualties, 16 soldiers wounded, 0 killed. Ambassador Thryn sat in the conference room 3 days later. Representatives from every major galactic civilization had gathered to discuss the new political reality. Humanity had saved them from extinction. Now they needed to decide what that meant for the future. "We propose the establishment of a Galactic Defense Council," Admiral Akoy announced. "A combined military force trained in modern warfare doctrine. Humanity will provide tactical instruction and share our technology. All member species will contribute forces and resources. The goal is to prevent future threats before they become existential crises." The proposal passed unanimously. Nobody wanted to fight the next war without human help. Within months, training facilities opened on Luna and other human worlds. Officers from dozens of species came to learn human military science. The galaxy was entering a new era. Commander Willis found Thryn in the observation deck weeks later. "I have been assigned as liaison officer for the new Defense Council. I will be working with human instructors permanently." "Congratulations, Commander, you earned it." She looked out at the stars. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had accepted their help the first time they offered? How many lives would have been saved if we had not been too proud to learn from species we considered primitive? I think about it often, but perhaps we needed to fail first. Perhaps we needed to face extinction before we could accept that our way was not the only way." Thryn joined her at the window. "Humanity taught us more than military tactics. They taught us humility." Admiral Akoy approached them, carrying data pads with new threat assessments. "Ambassador, Commander, we have detected unusual energy signatures in the outer rim. It might be nothing, but I am organizing reconnaissance missions. We need to stay vigilant." Willis smiled, already planning for the next crisis. "That is what we do, Commander. We prepare for war so we can preserve peace." Akoy pulled up star charts showing the mysterious energy readings. "The galaxy is dangerous. There will always be threats, but now we face them together, and together we are stronger than any enemy." Thryn looked at the charts, then at the human admiral who had saved his civilization. "Admiral, I believe the galaxy is fortunate that humans chose to be protectors rather than conquerors." "We are fortunate too, Ambassador. We found allies worth protecting.